preparing and will probably be live in 2 seconds. I also need to confirm that that's the case. And we're also waiting for Nelson to get on.
There we go. I can see everybody. Yeah, we're better than New York, so that's not saying much. So yeah. How is anyone in Chicago? I heard Chicago's been a hot spot.
Officially live.
Oh.
Well, we can keep talking for sure. No, I mean like.
Well, a lot of us are in Chicago, but given that we're all students, we're not doing anything clinical right now. So I can't comment on what it's actually like on the front lines. But.
Yeah. But I mean, be careful, y'all, and social distancing, stay away. Because I've seen it, and yeah.
Oh,
it's
stay
something.
safe and healthy yourself.
Oh, best believe. Getting tested was, I think, the most nerve-wracking, anxiety-inducing. Yeah.
Crazy.
Getting a negative was so happy.
Okay. I'm not sure where Nelson is, but I'm not sure if we should wait or, but we are live.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are live on the Black Kids White Coat YouTube channel. Thank you guys all for joining us today.
Thank you.
I can go ahead and introduce you guys and then kind of when, okay, there's Nelson. So I'll just like go ahead. So we have Christy. She's from the University of Illinois, matched at New York University. We have Monique from Nova Southern University. She matched at Cape Fear Valley Medical Center. Jalea from Frank H. Netter School of Medicine. She matched at Northwestern McGaw. Adrian from University of Illinois and matched at University of Washington. Earl from University of Illinois and matched at Rush. And then Ken from Loma Linda, who matched at UC Irvine. So I'm Lillian, one of the co-hosts for the Black Kids White Coat channel. And you guys can all, the other co-hosts can introduce themselves.
Adama, go ahead.
Oh, ladies first, thank you. Adama, I'm a first-year resident in Southern California in family medicine. And then...
All right, I'll go. And I'm Nelson. I'm a fourth year at UIC, going to radiology.
Where?
I'm going to Vanderbilt. No,
Oh
hey, obviously we all matched, so we all lit. Yeah. So not even, you know.
Yeah, congratulations to you guys on matching. Round of applause. And thank you guys.
Thank you guys.
That Corona hand clap.
Thank you guys for being here. Okay, well, the first thing we're gonna start off with is just kind of tell us your journey. And I'm just gonna go according to the list because there's a lot of you guys. So we're just gonna go according to the list in the order so that there's no like But Christy, you're the first on my list. So you can go ahead and just tell us your journey through just getting to this point.
Ooh, sure, okay. So let's see. I was born and raised in Crete, Illinois. I went to undergrad at U of I, University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. I was pre-med, studied molecular biology there. Was a little bit untraditional in that I took about a year and a half off in between undergrad and medical school and worked as a pathology technician. Which was very interesting, but I think also a great opportunity sort of in that interim to still have exposure to working side by side with clinicians. And then after that, matriculated into medical school, also at the University of Illinois, where I pursued the joint program, so the MD, MBA. So took an extra year and stayed in school for med school, at least for a total of 5 years with that additional year. And I also was someone who and I imagine we may get to this a little bit later, originally did not know that I wanted to do emergency medicine coming in, but ultimately saw the light and made that decision. Here I am.
Cool.
Thank you. Monique?
So I was born and raised in Massachusetts, went to undergrad at Boston University where I studied human physiology. I also took a year off between undergrad and medical school to apply and such. And after that, I got accepted into Nova Southeastern University, moved my way to Florida because I was done with the cold, still done with the cold. And I loved it here. And I went in knowing I wanted to do emergency medicine. And it kind of like, even through my rotations, that it kind of stuck. The only thing that came second was like OB-GYN. But besides that, I knew it was EM. And so I just continued all the way through, and I love it.
Cool.
Yeah. Sorry, I muted myself. Julia's next.
So I'm from Brooklyn, New York, originally born and raised. I went to Dartmouth College for undergrad. I studied geography and economics, so pretty different, but I did know I wanted to be a doctor. I was a college athlete, so orthopedics was naturally like the first thing that I thought I wanted to do. Very not traditional, I would say. I did teach for America. I was a chemistry teacher for 2 years out in LA, and actually applied to medical school, didn't get in. Then went to Drexel for a post-bac, then came to Quinnipiac. I was still orthopedics all the way, even did an orthopedic internship in Dimensions. And then between third and fourth years when I started second guessing what I wanted to do. And that's when I did ortho aways and emergency medicine aways. And my passion was with EM and not ortho. So, yeah.
Okay, and Adrian?
How's everybody doing? My name is Adrian. I'm originally from Seattle, born and raised. Went to Stanford for undergrad. Studied public health and underserved communities. And I also got a master's degree in sociology when I was there. So I'm pretty non-traditional. I was out for about 7 years between undergrad and med school. After college, I went to work in Washington, D.C. at the Office of Minority Health, the program officer there, oversaw some different grant programs. Afterwards, I went and did a post-bac program at the University of Pennsylvania. I kind of always knew I wanted to go to medical school, but undergrad is really hard. The sciences are really hard, and I just didn't really feel like I was ready. So I did the post-bac program. And even the post-bac program, did better, but still didn't do great. So after that, I went back to Seattle, worked at Seattle Children's Hospital, did research into health equity issues at Seattle Children's Hospital. Also became a volunteer firefighter EMT during that time, loved it. And then from there, that's when I went to medical school. So I even got accepted, applied broadly, but knew it was going to be an uphill battle for me. So I got accepted into a post-bac program, a conditional acceptance post-bac program at UIC. And then that's why I went to medical school here. And then been here for a good number of years. I also took an extra year off to get a master's in public health while I was in med school. And always knew I was interested in emergency medicine, but also was really interested in family medicine as well. So I kind of did a couple of programs during med school to figure out if that was the right move for me. But ultimately, emergency medicine won out. And so I'm here now, ready to be an intern, I guess.
Cool.
Dope.
And we have
And
Earl.
just to
ahead.
the side, real quick, several of us here did the same post-bac program. I know Earl did, Adrian, and myself. So just a quick aside, we rolling deep real quick.
Earl.
Hi, everyone. I'm Earl. I did undergrad at Dartmouth as well. Go Big Green.
Big Green.
I have a very non-traditional path. So I was a psychology major at Dartmouth, pre-med track. I decided to chase milk and honey on Wall Street. So I went into marketing and sales for a little bit. I did that in New York for a little while, moved to Seattle, did that too. Then I left and decided I was gonna go back and pursue medicine again. And I went to Rosalind Franklin for a semester. Decided to leave after that semester to start a consulting company. I have a consulting company that consults for nonprofits and charter schools in Chicago. I was doing that for about 3-4 years, started that in about 2011. And I decided that I wanted to actually pursue my passion, go back to school and go get my degree for medicine. So that's what I did. I decided to come back and finally knock it out.
I'm back to the dark side.
Right. Oh, it's a quick aside. Like, I just got to give the shout out to UHP and Pamela Meadows and Yolanda.
Yeah,
They held
UIC.
me down. They gave me the shot with the post-bac program because I went to medical school and then left and then tried to come back. So I wasn't the most ideal candidate to get back in. So appreciate them giving me the shot.
Look at you now.
Yay.
Right. Look at me now.
And then we have Ken.
What's up, guys? So I'm Ken, born and raised in Toronto, Canada. So I went to undergrad in the University of Windsor. It's kind of between the border of Canada and Detroit. I'm on the like non-traditional route. So I actually kind of took a year off, took my MCAT, and I worked at Best Buy. Didn't get in that cycle. So I did a master's at Rutgers, a master's in biomedical sciences. So I did that, applied again. Fortunately, I got admission into Loma Linda. So coming into Loma Linda, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I was kind of in the fence between orthopedics and emergency. So, you know, I dib and dabbled like, you know, with like shadowing and all of that between the two, and like at AMEC conferences, just networking and kind of getting to know the two fields as well. And then, you know, I think during third year rotation, I was like, this lifestyle is not for me. So I got a mentor, you know, got some more shadowing experience, and I just fell in love with emergency medicine. And then, you know, I matched at University of California at Irvine. So yeah, that's my
Hey, congrats.
Thank you.
So dope. So you have like a lot of different perspectives, a lot. So that's really cool. And I know a lot of you guys touched on this before, but can you talk about the exposure to the field a little bit more, and like, I guess, advice for people who are considering it or interested in it? What can they do to, you know, start early on? Like, you can talk about your exposure to it and how you kind of ended up becoming an emergency medicine physician, but then also like any advice or things that you've picked up along the way that could be helpful for those who are coming behind. And anyone can jump in for this.
I could start. Yeah, so when I was in undergrad, just to kind of like, you know, beef up my resume, I volunteered at the hospital, and fortunately, like the place I volunteered at was the emergency room. When I took that year off as well too, the only place I could really volunteer at was also the emergency room as well. So I had like 2-3 years of just emergency room exposure. And I just love the fact that, you know, even as a volunteer, some of the physicians, they'll help me like reduce fractures and just do little stuff like that. And I just saw that like they could do a whole variety of stuff that other specialties couldn't do as well too. I think another thing that also helped me out was like getting a mentor in the emergency department who like, you know, looked at my my step scores and just my resume and kind of guided me in the right direction so that I would be like, you know, a competitive applicant come, you know, my 4th year as well too. And kind of just advice as well too, like, you know, as a minority in this field, there's not a lot of people like us. So you are like a hot commodity. So even if your step scores aren't like outright amazing, you know, just being a well-rounded individual, getting in terms like, you know, being involved in like EM, like interest groups and just leadership positions, because that's what an EM physician is, a leader in that setting as well too. So I think, you know, don't let scores or like negative people bring you down, but just make sure that you're a well-rounded applicant, and then you'll be fine during the interview trail.
So I can go second. So after I graduated from high school, my dad is from Haiti. So after the earthquake, we went down there to help out. And there were some medical students there from Tufts University and also some EM physicians there. And I guess that's where my like interest for emergency medicine started, because I could see the versatility they had to deal with any type of patient that came in with limited resources. And I have a passion about like mission trips and, you know, just helping underserved populations. And I was like, this is exactly what I want to be. So I knew I wanted to be a doctor, but that's when like emergency medicine kind of stuck. So then I was pre-med in undergrad, then graduated, went to medical school, and the passion was just still there. I liked the fact that you deal with patients from all different backgrounds and you deal with all different types of cases. I'm the kind of person that if I stuck with like one specialty, like just GI or just neuro, I'd probably get bored after a little while dealing with the same thing. So I like versatility, and that's exactly what emergency medicine will give me, along with the acute aspect of it. And as far as advice when it comes to pursuing emergency medicine, I didn't have any specific like EM mentors. My mentors were more like the medical students above me, and that helped me throughout the years. But because I already knew what I wanted to do, I kind of just took the opportunities like during auditions and during what's called my third year, I went to a hospital where you could do like in and out shifts in the emergency department. So I would take as much advantages, like every Tuesday night you could go. So I'd take as many advantages as I could then and ask the physicians questions, you know, did IVs and did practice because that's what I love to do. And also was involved in the emergency medicine club at my school with events that they held on. And I agree with the STEP score thing. And I go to DO school. So I took both. If you go to a DO school, definitely take STEP. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Just a little shout out for that. But so I took both COMLEX and STEP. And you know, my scores weren't great, but like you said, just being a well-rounded person, don't give up on your dreams, seek out people that can help you. So don't stop with just the score, because they really appreciate a well-rounded person that's really willing to put in the effort and hard work.
Those facts.
I'll take a moment to piggyback off of that and tell my story as well. So originally when I came in, I was anesthesiologist. I've wanted to be an anesthesiologist since like that age 8. And I say this because I want to like stress how much of a pull it was from anesthesia initially. In one summer, I was exposed to emergency medicine through a summer exposure program. And it changed my life. I was introduced to procedures. And at that point, it was like any specialty that does not have procedures involved, I do not want any part of it. No offense to anyone else that doesn't, but I was just like, if I'm not using my hands, I'm really not, you know, trying to be involved. So unfortunately, that still left anesthesia though. So all through second, third, and fourth year, I was still battling EM and anesthesia, but most of my work was going into emergency medicine, because that's where the majority of my, I guess, work I had put in lied already. What broke it down for me was, I'm a very philanthropic person. So what broke it down for me is that down my path, I'm going to, you know, create pipelines, do all of this stuff, because I love kids, love Black kids. And the difference for anesthesia and EM for me is that anesthesia, all of the patients are asleep. I can't talk to anyone. I can't speak to them in their language. I can't speak to them in their cultural, you know, ways, so they can understand. I can't increase patient education when people are asleep. So at that point, it was the cutoff for me. I was like, I'm going to go emergency instead of anesthesia. In terms of applying and advice into emergency, I have a very, very unique situation, which I just found out about maybe a month and a half ago. So it's new stuff, fresh off the presses. We're talking about scores. I actually applied without any scores. So I was overzealous and I did my application in June, wrote my personal statement, all of that, submitted it, didn't look at it again. I found out a month and a half ago that I needed to resubmit my transcripts. Once my scores came out, I never did that. So all of my interviewing and stuff like that, none of it had any scores involved, which means everybody that interviewed me off the strength of my CV and everything that I did philanthropically throughout school and stuff like that. So scores are important, but if you're out there rocking and doing what you need to do, people will be interested in you anyway.
Wait, not even step 1?
No, my step 1 was there, but my step 2,
yeah.
Yo, damn, bro, like you must be out here. you are like a Nobel Prize winner or something. You out here. They just looked at your name, Earl Williams. Get him.
I would also add to what Earl said, because, you know, I am someone who decided very late to do emergency medicine. Similar to Earl, I wanted to be an OBGYN for as long as I could remember, but came into medical school, and I think somewhere around like M2, M3, I kind of started to second guess that. And I think I was very, very fortunate to have mentors around me that, you know, really pushed me to think about emergency medicine. And it's actually pretty incredible because my closest mentor, he also trained at NYU. So we will be graduating residency 20 years apart now from the same institution. So that definitely had a large impact. And I think the other thing that was helpful, and I think this is kind of specific to EM, and, you know, we've talked some about like test scores and not letting that necessarily deter you. I think another big thing too is being strategic about how you choose your away rotations. I was someone who was very interested in training at a county program. And so I did an away rotation at one of the very strong county programs. And I think that had a lot to do with interviewing at a lot of sort of these, stronger county programs throughout the country. So I would definitely think about that some as well when you're looking at choosing these aways.
I'll try to close the loop though, because I think your original question was about like, how do you find mentorship? Was that right? Through this like entire process. And so like two things is, I think that there's like the pre-medical school and there's like during medical school. And I think medical school, it's really about, how do you get exposure? And one of the biggest things that I did, so I was an EMT for a while, and I did that in the 911 service. And so now a lot of people become EMTs and they work for an ambulance service. We just do transports. I don't think that's the preferred way to go. So I did that. I love the experience. I love the job. It gave me a lot of things to talk about, even when I was applying to medical school and about residency. And then also, definitely shadowed like in the ED, also volunteered at a community health center. So that just gets you like a basic understanding of like, why do you want to become a doctor versus being a nurse practitioner versus being a PA? I think those are like important questions to answer as you're trying to get into medical school. I think once you get to medical school, how do you find mentorship? It's definitely about finding not only emergency medicine physicians, but emergency medicine physicians that might be interested in what you're interested in. So I have like a very, very big interest in health equity, minority health disparities. So I was really lucky that at UIC, there's a lot of EM physicians who are really into this field. It's called social emergency medicine, which I didn't know was a thing up until probably, second year of med school. And then having mentors in the department, Dr. Del Rios, then having interacted with Dr. Pendergrass, like they allowed me to see what my career in emergency medicine could be like. Because I really thought that, as someone who's passionate about working in the community, serving underserved populations, that might be difficult with emergency medicine. And thought that might be more catered towards family medicine or internal medicine, but that couldn't be any further from the truth. So connecting with them, getting in projects where we did hands-on CPR, community-based training, get involved in research projects to that. So there's a whole wealth of opportunities. So I would say not only trying to find physicians, emergency physicians that are interested in what you're interested in, but that might be people who do ultrasound, like that might be people who do emergency medicine, critical care, and connecting with those people, because then it really allows you to find your niche in emergency medicine, which I think is like nice to talk about on interviews, because a lot of times on interviews, the question comes up, all that came up at least half the time for me is, where do you see yourself 10 years from now? And a lot of programs really value somebody who has thought about what is their career in emergency medicine going to look like.
Cool. Did anybody else have anything to add to that?
Yeah, for sure. I'm kind of piggybacking off of what Adrian just said. The way you do that is do what you love, and there will be people there that share the same passion that you have. And those are the people that you should connect with and network with. A lot of people do approach me and ask me how to find mentors. Where do I look? I don't look anywhere. I just go do what I'm passionate about. If people see my passion, or I see something they're doing and I want to be a part, and that's how I get involved. It takes the stress of trying to find connections with mentors out, because you're already in the same realm.
Mm. Cool.
And just to follow up on that statement as well, I think another avenue that I don't think I really thought enough about until I was kind of like in the application, or kind of right before the application cycle, was kind of think about these large conferences. So the Society of Academic Emergency Medicine, or the ACEP conference. I think going to those types of conferences are literally like the best thing you could potentially want to do if you're in medical school, and just to make connections with people. And then there's also like there's the EMRA, so the Emergency Medicine Resident Association. They have all these different subcommittees, and go into those meetings. That kind of puts you in a place which will probably put you in front of like 90% of people who are applying to emergency medicine, because most people don't do that. They don't know about it. I talked to somebody. Shout out to Linnell, who's at PGY, I believe 3 right now, Jacoby, and she kind of hit me to that and was like, hey, if you're trying to go into EM, you should really think about going to these conferences. That'll give you the exposure that allow you to meet people, current residents, program director. All of these conferences have residency fairs, right? And so that kind of just really exposes you to in ways that you might not have thought of.
Real quick, you said PGY. Can you just explain what that means for anybody watching?
Oh yeah, excuse me. So she's a third-year resident currently in emergency medicine.
Yep. So PG means like postgraduate year, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So. Yep.
Okay. And also, just I guess get a little deep here, but what have been some difficult or low points throughout your journey. You can talk about, you know, hopefully overcoming it, or if you're still going through it and want to share, just to kind of, you know, encourage other people.
And feel free to be as deep or as candid as possible. This is not the interview trail, so we've already matched. So, you know, be real, because people are watching. People are going to go through the same problems. So,
yeah,
you know.
I
could go. Oh, you can go.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so when I was at Dartmouth, I was doing my pre-med classes. It wasn't going well. I originally wanted to major in chemistry, and I failed my first chemistry class. Well, I didn't fail it. I dropped it before I failed it, but I was on the verge. And and I was like, oh, what am I gonna do? And I graduated Dartmouth. My GPA was like a 2.76. I have my transcript saved too, just to remind me of how far I've come. But when I joined Teach for America, I was getting my master's in education at the time. My GPA there was great. So when I applied to medical school, I was like, who wouldn't want a chemistry teacher? And I applied to 31 schools. I got 31 rejections. And I was like, wow, like what happened? So what I did, I literally called schools up and I was like, why did y'all reject me? And most of them were just like, your GPA for your master's program is great, but those aren't science classes. You haven't proven yourself in any of the science classes. So then that's when I went to Drexel and went and got another master's, which I was like, I don't need another degree, but I needed to prove that, you know what, I can do this. And at first it was a struggle, especially a lot of times in post-bac programs, you're taking multiple heavy level science classes at the same time. So I'm taking microbiology, genetics, physiology, all at the same time. And I struggled a lot. But eventually, like I was literally in my house studying every day, all day, because I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, this is what I have to do. And I remember when I applied the second time, I was so nervous. Like, I was like, I don't think this is going to happen. And then I just remember, like, I had a conversation with somebody where they were talking about like my faith in the process and like how much faith I had in me becoming a doctor. And that conversation sort of changed the way I was thinking about it and really changed how everything played out. And I applied the second time. I was very successful in applying. And then I got to medical school and it's like, okay, here we go again with struggling with the science classes and things like that. But it really just, a lot of it for me was confidence. I felt like being at Dartmouth, my confidence went all the way low, very, very low. And then now it's like, I'm constantly reminding myself, like, you can do this, like, you are here for a reason, you are going to be a doctor. Like now it's really happening. So like, trust me, like, even if your GPA is low, I took the MCAT 3 times. The first time I took it, I think I got like a 16. So like, you can overcome all of those obstacles. You just have to keep trying and pushing yourself.
So
okay.
Go ahead. You were talking next. Go ahead. No, you're right. Go ahead.
All right. Yeah. So probably one of the lowest points was probably in actually medical school. So during my second year before taking STEP, there's like this hard class, it's called pathophys. Not a lot of schools have it, but Loma Linda has it. And unfortunately, I did not pass. So, I had to remediate, and that kind of pushed things back. So then, when going to like, advisors and whatnot, like, my options, I felt low, but some people like, it's just a class, who cares? Like, but I'm like, damn, like just that, you unsatisfactory on my transcript, like, oh my gosh, like, what they're gonna say? So then, I had people tell me like, honestly, your chances of matching into California are probably 0 to none. You might have to do like a prelim year and just all this like negative stuff too. And like, even like I was saying before, my STEP score wasn't like out of, like, it didn't blow out the park or anything like that. So like, dealing with that, like, I feel like that was like one of my lowest points, like, because all of my like my friends and whatnot, they didn't have to deal with, having that fail on their transcript, but I did. But, I think as you're talking about, faith and just having a good support system, just having my mom, pray for me, just having people encourage me, and just having people behind my corner that, just reinforce that, hey, Ken, like, it's not just about scores, it's also about your personality and just the other things that you bring to the table as well, too. So, that same thing is what I took on the interview trail. And, PDs didn't even ask me about my STEP or my transcript. They just wanted to get to know me. So I think it ended up working out in the end. So I think the real like thing that I just want to let people know is that don't let your scores define you. Don't let grades define you. Just be a good person, be well-rounded, show that you're really passionate about what you're going into, and everything should work out.
So to go off of that, so my lowest points were definitely anytime I had to take a standardized exam. So when I took like the MCAT, I didn't do well on it. I like just like skated by, but I was like, I'm going to apply to medical school. Like that was a sad point for me. And I was like, oh, maybe I can't do this, you know, but like support system. My mom was like, no, you want to be a doctor your whole life. You can do this. So I decided to just apply. And even during that time, like I didn't do well on, I got like a C- in like my gen chemistry course, both semesters, my first year. I went to the guidance, pre-med guidance counselor, like every year to make sure, like, can I still apply with this grade or do I have to retake it? And every year they told me, okay, it's fine, because I raised my scores in other classes. But then come my senior year, final semester of undergrad, a new advisor told me that, you know, you can't apply to medical school with this grade. So, you know, I was like, I was just about to graduate. It was like April. And I'm like, when am I supposed to take this? So I had to, you know, I took the year off and I took a summer course in general chemistry again. And that time I did exceptionally well in that course. So it just goes to show that even with like I like almost failed that course and I was like, oh my God, I can't do this. And then taking a second time around, just the growth through first year to fourth year was just tremendous. And that's the same thing I can say about medical school in general. But so then my MCAT score didn't come out great, but I just decided, you know, I'm going to apply anyway and go with it. And I did end up getting interviews and acceptances, and then come again, the whole cycle again, got into medical school, everything's going, you know, as well as medical school can go. And then I had to take STEP and COMLEX level 1 and then level 2. And the same thing again, you know, just like skated by. And so the thing that really kept me through was like my support system, my medical school, like mentors and stuff, like just encouraged me, don't give up on your dreams. You can do this, you can do this. And I knew like for me, EM was the only thing. So I only applied EM. I know other people that I know that didn't do so well did like EM, FM, and a few others, but I was like, no, there's nothing else I want to do except EM. So if you're one of those people like me, still stick to your dreams. And so then I applied and I got it, and obviously I matched, so it was awesome. But like I can say, it's really just believe in yourself, have faith, and support system can basically get you through any of those ups and downs. No one's perfect. They want a well-rounded person.
I'll jump in. So I mean, like everybody else, like I had a lot of struggles with standardized tests. I think, you know, that's kind of a theme. And I mean, that goes all the way back to, you know, like MCAT. And there's just a couple of things. So, you know, like dark days. I mean, I think even in undergrad, like I was one of those people that came from a public high school. I went to a place like Stanford, some of the smartest people I'd ever been around. And I was just not prepared academically to excel in the sciences. That was like, and I love my experience at Stanford, but frankly, it was the worst place ever to be a pre-med because there was nobody teaching us how to be like a good student, right? And I think that's like some of the other institutions which we know are probably doing a better job, right? So we know that Xavier in Louisiana is doing a better job of that. We know that like UMC Baltimore, like University of Maryland, Baltimore County is just doing a better job of taking like students from all different backgrounds and getting them to a good place. And then kind of, you know, definitely I took the MCAT twice also, and then knew I still wasn't a competitive candidate. So then I applied to programs for medical school that I knew had conditional acceptance post-bac programs. And so that's something that just like I did because I knew that like if I just apply broadly, like I got to be strategic about this because it's expensive and I want to like, you know, figure out how am I going to maximize my outcomes. The darkest days in medical school were absolutely like the time around step 1. So I ended up, because you know, first and second year of med school, you're just trying to float, right? And so you're just thinking about the next test that's in front of you. You're not thinking about like the broader scale. I'm trying to be this great doctor and all this. You're just trying to pass the test. And then so you know, you do that. Next thing you know, someone tells you got to take step 1 in like 6 weeks, and you're like, what? Step 1? And so for me, I think there was a lot of just like the imposter syndrome during that time, like, you know, feel like I couldn't cut it, like, you know, the tests weren't going great, you know, not sleeping, not eating. And so all of those things. So I even ended up extending my, my time. I took like an extra, like 4 months to study. And part of it was just to get myself right mentally. And then even at the end of that point, like I passed, but I didn't pass by that much. And so for me, you know, that's just a huge struggle on multiple levels. Like you question yourself, you question your abilities, you question like all this hard work. And the thing that I would say too, though, is that I just want to like stress the point of like this idea, if you're not, like you're going to be taking standardized tests for the rest of your life. So it's really important to ask the question of why am I not doing well on standardized tests? Right? You got to really, really like think about that question. And I thought a lot about that question. I think a lot of times, like, especially like we as like people of color, we just think about as long as I study more or I'm not studying enough, I'm going to improve my outcomes. there is not a direct correlation, but between how much time you study and your outcomes. Like that's like a fact, like educationally, right? So I think the question that I really push people to do, if you feel like you're not doing well on standardized tests, it's like, why am I not doing well? Am I like not using the right material? Am I like not using the type of flashcards? Am I not making good flashcards? Like, do I think just by reading something, I'm going to do a good job? So I try to get a lot of feedback into that, whether it was from like our school of them having educational like specialists and whatnot, to try to figure out what's the system that works best for me. And I think answering that question is like really important. It's important, it's crucial while you're in med school, but if you can figure that stuff out in undergrad, you know, if you can figure out in undergrad, like, how do I study best? That's going to set you up for success regardless of what path you choose. So I would really push you to do that. Instead of just like having the support system is really important, but just studying more ain't going to be that helpful. It's about really like what like actual steps do I need to take as a student to propel to the next level? Because, you know, the reality is that that there's a lot of us who probably didn't do well. I knew that for me to be successful, probably going into emergency medicine, I needed to do a lot better on step 2. And that's what I was able to do. And like during the time of like as a third year during clinicals, I realized that like, I'm not the dumbest person in the room, right? Like I know answers when sometimes the intern doesn't know it, or some of the other like M3s are there. So that kind of gave me that self-confidence. I approached each one of the NBME exams just kind of like, how do I continuously like get a little bit better? And then it kind of just, that hard work kind of paid off in like step 2, because the reality of the situation is programs will not interview you if you don't have like above like a certain like step 1 score. Like that's just like fact. Not all programs do that, but a significant number of them do. So it's important to be cognizant of those things and just know that like that for sure there's always a way to like make up like scores and just work hard and all these other things, but it's really about being strategic also.
I feel like this is a perfect time for me to piggyback and say something, because I had the opportunity to watch Adrian go through his process the first time, and he had quite a bit of advice that helped me throughout my process. But without a doubt, I echo everyone in here, standardized testing is a monster. And step 1 for me was the first time I actually had physical manifestations of stress. I had heard about it, I had read about it. The entire time I thought people were making this stuff up. I'm like, there's no way that it actually happens. My neck was hurting, back was hurting, no matter how I sat, laid down, couldn't sleep. If I did sleep, I would dream about the test and it was a nightmare. Like, it was a lot. So for me, mental stability was the biggest challenge for me during these times. And luckily, I had people like Nelson who I was able to study with and bounce ideas off of. And sometimes we would just stop studying and literally whine and moan for 30 minutes and be like, okay, all right, that was nice. Time to get right back to the work. So the support system is very important. I had my family, I had friends as much as I could throughout that time. But I think the point I want to hone in on is having support systems that are in your same struggle, that can understand the language, your experience, what's actually happening, because, you know, we tend to be the excellers of our world. So people are always like, oh, you got it. You always got it. You'll be fine. And the truth of the matter is we don't feel that when we're going through it. The reason we have it is because we freak the heck out about not possibly having it. So we end up making it in the long run. Have people that understand when you say like, I don't feel like I have it, they can ask you why, kind of like Adrian was saying. They can have that conversation. Why? Where's your weakness? What didn't you understand about this? I understand this. This is where you're missing out on. While we were studying for step 1, I had been in medical school for 2 years at this time and realized I didn't even know how the glomerulus works. Like, he had to re-explain it to me. And I'm like, I'm a clean, 24 months into medical school at this point, and I'm doomed. There's no way I'm gonna make it.
I'll never stop giving you crap for that, Earl, I swear. 20 years from now, I'll be like, yeah, remember that one time
You had to spend 15 minutes teaching me the glomerulus. Like, I did not.
Oh my goodness.
Honestly, that was the lowest point for me ever. The lowest point. That particular moment was the lowest point.
Oh man. Thank you guys. Does anyone else have anything to add? Because we have a bunch of questions from the chat.
Yeah, the chat's popping.
Yeah. Okay, we have this first question. I think this is more of like a like career question. How do you guys feel about the rapid increase in the number of EM programs opening? And do you foresee pay rates decreasing or possible saturation?
I'll take that one. So more doctors are always better. Like, there's no way I'll ever say that we need to have less doctors. No, more doctors, more melanin doctors especially. In terms of pay rates going down and things like that, I don't think so. So medicine in itself is a business of sales. Like, we just work in the most guaranteed sales of life. So pay rates going down, if I'm using my more professional business side, probably not likely. And we have a whole like aspect of business and life medical managers that make sure it doesn't happen. So I don't think you should be concerned about that. I think if you are a medical student, I think you should be concerned with the sacrifices that you're preparing yourself to give to the community. I doubt money will be your concern at all. For me, it's more so the time, the energy, the emotional energy, trying not to take people's problems home with me, trying to fight this, lifelong battle of patient education, improving morbidity and mortality long term. Like, I guarantee you, once you make it through this, you probably won't be concerned about money at the end of it.
I would also add to that. So I wouldn't be concerned about sort of salaries going down, if you will, for physicians, largely because we spend a lot of years in school, getting our education, getting our training. And I think that pay differential, especially when you think about like physicians, for instance, compared to mid-level providers, right? If that difference didn't exist, I think you'd have a lot less people wanting to go sort of the medical school route. So for that reason, I'd expect that salaries will stay, more or less where they are. I think the other thing to think about is that our jobs, our compensation is very intertwined with health policy, right? Very dependent on the policies that are in place and how they change from administration to administration. For example, if we get an administration that comes in that wants to implement universal health care, right? How could this impact not only our salaries, but the need for certain types of physicians, right? If you had all of our population that had access, right, to more preventative care, we naturally see less of coronary artery disease and diabetes and hypertension, et cetera. So maybe someone like a vascular surgeon, we might need less of, right? If we have less people suffering from diseases of their arteries. So in short, to answer the question, no, that's not something that I would be concerned about. I would agree you should do, what it is that you want to do, but I would say I'm pretty confident that physicians will continue to be compensated very well.
I'll add a couple of just thoughts to it. I think one of the things that does come up, I think the compensation question, there's a couple of interesting things. So there's a lot of new programs that have opened up in the past couple of years. Specifically, there's two reasons. One is that Florida has had a whole slew of programs that have opened up. Particularly, a lot of the new programs that have been opening up are because they're like through private hospitals and they're private groups. So the question, like in the emergency medicine community, since they really don't have true academic affiliations, like what's the motive of those organizations? Do they really want to increase like EM physicians, or are they kind of also willing to use like residents kind of as a revenue stream for that hospital, right? And I think that there's no clear-cut answers on that. I think there's also no like clear-cut answers on like, what does this mean for our profession 5 to 10 years from now, right? So for all the MBAs and, the econ majors on here, it's just a supply and demand issue. And so do we see that like EM's like salaries are potentially going to be lower? And I think it's unlikely. I think what we do see right now, though, is there are some markets which are harder to get into and pay lower salaries, right? So I think a good example would be like San Diego, for instance, like about 5 years ago, it was really hard to get into San Diego as an EM doc into a group. And because of that, that means that then they can control like how much you're getting paid. So I think these things are all to be cognizant of. Like in the future, they're great questions to like be asking. I don't think they should like steer you into like, oh, like I really want to be like this type of doctor. But I can't. So for instance, another argument is like family medicine. You hear all the time that like, oh, family medicine is not well compensated. That's not a fact. Like I remember when I was on my family medicine rotation, to hearing like what the average salaries of people who were walking out for the family medicine, it was like $250 and like $300. It could go up even to like $350 if you're willing to work in a rural area, right? So I think that the compensation is there. The only thing that I will say though, that I will like just to kind of like add to Earl what mentioned earlier, is I think that you should be like very conscious of finances going into this entire process. You should be very clear about like, you know, if you have an option to go to 2 medical schools and one is going to be $200,000 less than the other, you should go to the one that's $200,000 less, right? Like, I think those are things that we need to think. Sometimes we approach this whole thing like, oh, like money doesn't matter that much, but then all of a sudden you have $350,000 in debt and you're like, well, what am I going to do? So I would really encourage you like now to just like really start thinking about like long-term, like how do you become a saver, right? Like how do you like you build a budget? Like if you're not doing all these things now, then you're not going to be like, your financial future isn't going to be set up in the future. So this is kind of like, if you guys don't follow this, like White Coat Investor, like you're in med school right now, you need to hop on that website, like post haste, right? And just think about like, how do you build things now when you don't have no money? So then you have good skills and techniques going forward in the future, because all that's going to allow you to be successful. So I would say the argument that they make on this website all the time is really less about how much you get paid, but it's more about how you spend your money, right? Because having like a high salary doesn't mean you're wealthy. And so really think about what those relationships mean and like all those different things, and learn about that now, even if you ain't got none, like figuring out a budget and like all those things, that's going to set you up for success, more so than like, I need to make as much money as possible.
Yo, shout out to the 0% interest rate. Dummy, your mute is on.
Family medicine docs can make upwards of $500,000 if you play your cards right. So just
and do procedures and all that. Yeah. Injections.
Oh my goodness.
Bill it up.
All right. So the next question is, and this is kind of pertaining to 4th year. Do you guys have advice for audition rotations, and what makes a student stand out during these rotations?
Yes. Okay. I think so. A couple things. I think one, when you're looking for programs to apply to 4-way rotations, there are so many programs that offer scholarships specifically for URM students. I would not apply to if you are URM, and there are even some programs that are for people who are, you know, economically disadvantaged, or people who are just interested in working with disadvantaged populations. You can get scholarships for away rotation. So that's my first piece of advice. Definitely take advantage of that if you can. Secondly, you want to look at programs that have a track record of helping students like you. So for me, it was important for me to look for programs that not only had the scholarship, but once I get there, what are you going to do for me? How are you going to help me? How are you going to support me in that rotation? So that was another thing that was very important for me. And the last thing, in terms of standing out with emergency medicine, there's so much to know. So I remember my first away rotation in EM, I had like 3 patients at first, which to me was a lot when you're first starting. And I was like, okay, this one has chest pain, but what is that from? And this one has shortness of breath. What is that from? Did somebody have a heart attack? Like, that's how I was thinking about it. But really, I realized it wasn't just the knowledge base, right? The knowledge base will come, the more you see patients, the more you'll be able to work on your differential diagnoses and things like that. For me, it was about always being helpful. So that meant being helpful to my attendings, being helpful to the residents I'm working with, being helping to the nursing staff, being helpful to the techs. Because those conversations that I had with the nursing staff and the techs, those conversations were the things that were remembered and were the things I got feedback on. It wasn't just about, oh, she didn't know Scarbosa's criteria. No, it was, this nurse said she was having a hard time with this patient and you helped her. And those are the things that they remembered. So just remember, everybody's watching you. They know who you are. So you got to be nice to everyone and be helpful to everyone as well.
Dope. And real quick, I hate to be the what you call it, abbreviation kind of police, but URM, just to make sure everyone knows what it means.
Underrepresented in medicine, formerly known as underrepresented minority. The AMC actually recently updated their definition. But yeah, it's online. Definitely look it up. Take advantage if you can.
I would add to that too. The EM Clerkship podcast is absolute gold. I would start listening to that like yesterday for any of the years that are hopefully, I don't know, with this COVID situation, going to have an opportunity to do aways. I think another thing that's helpful is if you know any residents or attendings at the programs that you are rotating with, set some time aside, reach out to them, say, hey, can we have a call if you're local, maybe, ask to have a coffee with them, and ask about some of the specifics, maybe that will help you to do well, specifically at that program. Ask if there are any, some places I have what we call like sour apple attendings that you might want to be aware of, that maybe they're a little bit more nitpicky, or, you know, maybe they want you to present in a certain way. And it's very helpful if you're aware of those things beforehand. And I think going back to what Jalea just mentioned is you have to be conscious of your interactions with absolutely everyone, especially your nurses. And I think with the nurses specifically, one thing that was really impactful is ensuring that you are communicating with the nurses, because that also helps you to stand out, right? When the nurse comes and tells you the update about your patient and not the attending or not the resident, that demonstrates that you're showing ownership of your patients. So definitely, you know, be conscious of the interactions that you're having with everyone in the department.
I like to
What? Go ahead.
Yeah, so for the fourth years that are trying to get into away rotations, I would say make sure, first of all, when you're picking a place, it's a place you can actually see yourself matching into, because, you know, statistically, wherever you do an away rotation at, they're going to really be looking at you, especially if they accept you as well. In terms of like excelling, I think everybody has hit the nail on the head. Just making sure that, you know, you're very helpful, you're a good team player, you're not annoying, just being socially aware. Like if the attending is busy, like don't interrupt them because you want to go give a presentation. Just being cognizant of your surroundings as well too. I think good presentation skills. So what I did was, like, whether it be an intern or a senior resident, you know, double check, okay, is my diagnosis making sense? Like they may add some tidbits to it to kind of enhance your presentation. So by the time you get to the attending and you're presenting your case, it should be flawless. And you guys are just working on the plan to help the patient as well too. Just some of the resources I used, WikiEM, I always like went on that before I went to go present to anybody. They have like case files as well too. So there's a whole bunch of resources. But I think like the podcast, I just think being a hard worker, having good presentation skills, and just being able to defend your differentials, even if they're wrong, but you can defend them like hardcore, nobody can fault you for that. So I think those are just some of the biggest points. Yeah.
Yo, you emergency folks, your presentations are like 2 seconds long. Liv, yeah? All right. Adrian, you're muted.
So I was going to add like two specific resources that I think are really good. So the first one, I think, to get really to see like what right looks like in terms of presentation skills for emergency medicine. The Society of Academic Emergency Medicine has a couple of publications on that. Like if you go to their website, they have like the link for M4s, and there you can see the link that says like, here's what a good presentation looks like, right? And it kind of like builds that criteria for you. There, they also just have like some general resources about the big thing for like us in emergency medicine is like, what's the most likely presentation? What are the things that, you know, can kill you right away, and what are some of the things that need to rule out, right? And this, in addition to that, I also just want to like give a gold star for a EM clerkship. I think a lot of times as we approach this, we kind of like are looking for a rubric to say like, you know, where do I need to start, right? Because it's just like, you know, like build it, like how do I start to build my foundation? And I found them to just be really, really good. I think he really walks you through in his blog about like, if you're trying to go into EM, like do these things. And I thought that really just gives you a place to start.
So I just wanted to say, if you go to an osteopathic school like myself, especially with like COVID-19, I saw on like Cord that there's talking to residency programs now about slows, and that this year that they should only require 1 slow instead of the usual 2. And if you go to a DO school, they want, some programs want 3. So for the M3s out there worried about this COVID and audition rotations, you know, just know that these societies are talking to residency programs about it and how they're gonna settle a thing that you only need like 1 slow, but just so you have that in mind. And also, if you go to an osteopathic school like myself, I would definitely go, before you pick, especially this year with, you know, probably having limited audition rotations, I would go on those residency pages, their home pages, their websites, and see who their residents are. So if they don't have any DO residents, especially because this year you probably have to be selective on how many auditions you can do, I personally, you know, you can take your chances, but personally, I wouldn't do an audition there, because a lot from auditions come interviews, and you definitely, especially this year, want, it's not going to be like guaranteed, but you want to strong foundation that you're going to be able to get an interview there. So if you are a DO student, there is still bias, unfortunately. And so I would definitely, before you pick your audition rotations, go on their websites and find out if there's any, if there's one, that's good, but at least one DO resident there. And also
And
just,
I have a, oh, sorry.
no, just to add on to that.
No, finish. Finish, yeah.
I guess like the biggest thing that I found on my audition rotations, it was less about, like you said, knowledge. You know, you get that as you go through each audition rotation. Like I know my first one was, you know, way worse than my like fourth one. And by the fourth one, I realized how like cookie cutter certain chief complaints can be. But it's ownership. They wanted to see that I was with that patient from the beginning to the end. If they needed a blanket, I was bringing them a blanket. If they like their vitals changed, I was letting the attending or the resident know. Like I was there from start to finish. And most of the time I only had 2 or 3 patients because that's exactly what they wanted me to do from beginning to end. And I was completely in charge of that patient. So ownership was a key thing. And also if you're not a part of EMRA yet, I would definitely join up for EMRA and get their, they'll send you a box with some, I guess like cheat sheet booklets in it, because there's one in there that does differential diagnosis and it will say chest pain at the top and then it'll say the differential and then your plan and your workup. And that was in my in my hand, like every single audition rotation to like audition rotation. Every time I came out of a patient's room, I was like, okay, yep, I asked those questions. Yep. Okay. I'm going to go present now. Cause I felt really confident. That was a lifesaver.
Yeah, so I have a quick thing just to say, just a brief story. So when you're picking your way rotation, make sure not only you like I said, make sure that's a place you can see yourself, but also ask other people what type of slows they give, because I have a quick story. So I have a friend actually, he 250s, both step 1, step 2, and he went to Denver, and unfortunately they gave him a bottom 10%, you know, and unfortunately he didn't match. So it was one of those, like, if he went to like a mid-tier and he had at least got like, you know, middle average or whatever, like, I think his outcome would have been a little bit better. So just like, I just know my friend, she, like the year before, she wanted to go to Denver, but they told her, do not go to Denver because they only give a certain amount of upper top 10s or upper 1/3. So she did hers at Vanderbilt and then she matched into Denver. So like I said, just make sure wherever you're rotating, ask other people, hey, do these guys give good slows? And do they give it an appropriate time, you know, before your application is due? Because you don't want to get screwed over or just, you know, not match because they gave you a bad slow, and that's not an actual reflection of your actual capabilities as well, too. So yeah.
Real quick,
I
sorry,
would
Monique.
add to that because
Oh, go ahead. I just want to get clear up what slow means, because we're used to, all of us are used to that.
Yes.
Monique,
So slow is standard letter of evaluation. So every EM program, on top of your letters of recommendation that you have for your application, emergency medicine has its own evaluation that they give to every program. So this is kind of like a standardized thing that every program director, clerkship director can see like across the EM board of how this person would function in their emergency medicine program.
I would also add to that because I had a similar situation also happen to a friend of mine. I would also, I forget, someone mentioned rotating somewhere that you could see yourself matching. But I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think you want to rotate somewhere where you can do well, get a good slow to get you to that place where you want to match, right? And I think this is also helpful in trying to connect with people that are at some of these programs, right? So there was one program that I was thinking about applying for an away rotation. I had the opportunity to talk to a resident that had recently graduated from that program, and they cautioned me. They said, you know, you can do that rotation there, but you know, the way we kind of evaluate people, even if you do outstanding the entire rotation, and there's one attending that maybe you had a bad shift, and that's going to happen. You're going to have bad shifts. You're going to have bad days. That could totally be held against you, right? Because that's just how they evaluate people there. And even though that was a great program, and that was a program that I could definitely see myself as a resident, I didn't think that that risk, if you will, was necessarily worth it. I've also heard that about Denver's program as well before, that they don't always, you know, necessarily give the greatest evaluation. So definitely think about that and be strategic when doing that. The other thing I would add is, and you don't have to have I don't think you don't have to have an EMRA membership for this, but take a look at the EMRA match, especially for the osteopathic students, because the map that they show you, you can click and look at the programs and they will tell you what percentage of students are osteopathic, or what percent of residents, I'm sorry, went to osteopathic medical schools. They'll also tell you the percentage of IMGs. So if there's any IMGs out there wondering which programs are favorable to them, EMRA has all of that information. If you just Google EMRA match, the link to that map will come up. And I found that to be very helpful.
Okay, thank you guys. I'm just gonna go on to the next question about I think someone mentioned the conferences earlier. If the same person could just say, when would you recommend going to such conferences, and what year of medical school would be considered too late to go, I guess, or what year of medical school would be considered too late, if any? So I'm guessing it's the same.
Yeah, I get it. So there's the two big conferences I would say is the Society of Academic Emergency Medicine. So that's an organization that you can join as a medical student, costs $20 a year to become part of. And then the other one is the American College of Emergency Physicians. That's what I describe the two. The Society of Academic Emergency Medicine, SAEM, is like the academic conference. And I would say that the ACEP is more of like the professional conference. They got a lot of people there trying to come sell products and whatnot. Both of those conferences have people who are coming, have like residency program directors come, and there's like tables and stuff set up for you to like go meet people and whatnot. So I think like, when's the question, like when's like the best time to go? So usually SAEM happens in the springtime, and then ACEP usually happens in the fall, generally right around the same time that like people are either like right before you're submitting like your application to residency, or like during. I think that's kind of like the general time frame. So I would say, when would be the best time to go? So SAEM, if you want to go, probably at the end of your M3 year, so then you're kind of like lining up people and figure out like what programs you want to apply to. And then probably when to go to ACEP is potentially like going in the springtime, going in like in the fall. And that's kind of when those things usually happen. So M3, M4 year, you can go as an M1 and M2, those things are always there. But at that point, I would say it's less about networking and just figure out like what's going on. I think I remember honestly going as like an M3 at like I think I was taking a year off, and I was so far out for like the program directors and other people that it was kind of like, yeah, it's great. But if I was a little bit closer, like in terms of being an M4, like during that time. So that's kind of what that's kind of like the time period that I would suggest of like going to those things.
The other thing too, I was fortunate to serve as an SAEM student ambassador. I believe those applications open up in, I think, December or January. For that, definitely do that. That was an amazing experience. It was about 60 of us that got to, essentially you're assisting with the conference when they need you to be, but you also have a lot of time to attend the sessions that you're really interested in and really have the opportunity to network. They pay for your registration to the conference, so you only have to like figure out how to get there. So that's great. I think the other plug I would say would be the SNMA Annual Medical Education Conference, AKA AMEC. I would also attend that specifically because there are programs there that have a dedication to increasing their diversity, right? They're attending that conference specifically because they're looking to recruit more URMs. So I think that's another one as well that I would consider attending. Shameless plug, our conference is now virtual this year. So if you're interested in attending, though we couldn't have the on-site, we are moving forward with the virtual option, and that'll be taking place in a couple weeks. So go check that out on snma.org.
And just to add, like for future years, the SNMA conference that we were just talking about, I ended up doing 5 away rotations because I did ortho and EM, and 4 of them came straight from that conference. So that would be my 3rd year in medical school. So that's definitely, like, they are looking for URM students specifically. That really helps.
Great, thank you guys. I think this question is for you, Julia, maybe related to what you were talking about in terms of how many schools you applied to for medical school. The question is, how many schools did you end up getting into? If you're comfortable with sharing.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. So the second time around, I applied to 27 schools. I went on 10 interviews and I got into 6. So the second time around, God had my back, y'all, if y'all want to really hear my testimony, but the second time around, yeah, things work out how they're supposed to work out. So, yeah.
Cool, thank you. And then the next question is related to burnout. I think this is something that I've also thought about, but EM is notoriously known as the burnout specialty. Was that a consideration when you were choosing your specialty?
I can take this one. For me, no. And I think it's because one of my mentors, who's also one of the same people who pushed me to do EM, the way he explained it to me was this. EM, full-time in EM, if you will, is about 13 shifts a month, right? So that's 13 days out of the month, which is considered full-time in emergency medicine. But in EM, because our work is shift-based, and as we talked about before, we are compensated very well. It's very easy for someone to say, oh, I'll pick up an extra shift. I'll pick up two more extra shifts. And next thing you know, you're working 18 shifts a month, which is not really what the specialty was designed for. Granted, we do work those number of shifts as residents, right, because we're in training, but thinking beyond that and sort of what your career will look like as an attending emergency medicine physician, you typically aren't working that many shifts a month. And so the people that tend to fall into that, the burnout pile, if you will, are those that are they tend to be working more than what the standard of those 13 shifts a month are. So no, that wasn't a concern for myself.
Does anyone else have anything to add to that?
I guess basically it's the same thing I would have said, because that wasn't a concern of mine, but every time I would talk to the physicians would come up to me like, are you worried about burnout or something like that? And that's exactly what they would tell me. They would tell me that, the physicians that did have burnout either, did it way too long, like into their 80s or something like that, where they just couldn't keep up with the stamina, the pace of an emergency department. But the main thing was that they were just taking on more and more shifts. So I think the important thing is, don't take on too many shifts, know your limits, but also to keep, like, this even goes for like medical school, keep the things that you love to do personally in your life, whether it's working out, watching TV, traveling, whatever it is, keep that in, like, don't forget about that and make sure you maintain those. And I feel like I'll be able to get through.
One of the reasons I went into emergency medicine was because of, like, I feel like there I actually saw work-life balance. And so the idea is, you do shift work, you do your days, but then at the same time. And so that's also one of the big things in emergency medicine is people have outside interests, whether that's extra clinical or whether they just like to fly fish or whether they're like woodworking. And so the emergency medicine field is kind of like adapted to like those different, to that thing. I think, one program director I ran into said it best about like burnout. So one of the things that we do know, which kind of helps alleviate burnout, is having something else that you're passionate about. So that's why people who do academic emergency medicine, they might not be compensated as high, but they generally like their work more, right? And so I think having something that parallels your career, regardless of what you do, whether that's like family medicine, whether it's orthopedic surgery, like if you have your career define who you are and what it is that you do, you're probably not going to be happy with it. But if you find something else that you're really passionate about, be that your family, be that your community, be that your hobby, like all those different things, like you're just more likely to have like a successful, like well-rounded, like career that's, where you're really hitting on wellness.
I think, Earl, did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, in general, if you just love what you do, for me, I know that residency is going to be terrible and stressful and hard work. I know I'm going to be tired.
Wow.
I know.
That must go through right now. She's literally like live from the hospital.
This Rona, I'm tired.
Right, exactly. So I know all of that is coming, but for me, again, I'm a very philanthropic person. So for me, I think what's going to help me make it through is patient interaction. Like, I come from an impoverished area. Like, these are my people. So for me to be able to sit there and, educate them very, culturally, colloquially, and let them know, like, taking hot sauce off of your fried chicken doesn't make it any healthier. You need to like maybe bake it instead of fry, like things like that, things that can't be said. I think those day-to-day small intricacies are what push me to deal with everything I'm going through or enjoy when I'm going through. Like, it's funny to me, like the way we're laughing now, like for me, I hope to avoid burnout by making work like that, making work people coming in not feeling well, but they're really coming in and they homie who they like, hey, this hasn't been working well for a while, and we just chop it up.
Dope stuff, dope. Okay, let's move on to this next question. This is for you, Adrian. Did you end up having to extend your time in medical school after taking extra time to study? Was this viewed as a red flag on your apps? And how was that interpreted or received by the programs?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So generally the way that our kind of medical school works is that once you take like a certain amount of time off, that I think for us was kind of like a 3-month mark, then that pretty much turns into an extra year. I approached it a couple of different ways. So for me, it worked out. So like I ended up extending kind of beyond that 3-month mark. I ended up taking like a total of 5 months. But for me, like I was able to fit in extra time into like that semester before I started clinical. So I was able to do things like I'm in the military. I went to some military training. I also traveled a bit during that time. So for me, it like worked out. And I think also for me, it like really, really worked out well in the sense of like, since I did so it put me in a position where I was too far behind my class and far ahead of like the class behind me, right? So I was in this gray zone. So what I was able to do then was I was able to do a lot of my M4 requirements before I left to do my master's in public health, and then came back. And then once I came back, the only thing I really had to do to graduate was the emergency medicine rotations. So to me, it also gave me that time to then have enough time to take step 2, which I knew I needed to be successful on. So for my particular case, yes, definitely extended it by a year since I was kind of past the 3-month mark. It definitely came up on my rotations. So I think that it definitely came up like, but the way that it kind of shows up is like a period, it shows up on your MSP like about when, forgot what that exact language, excuse me. So the MSP is like when you apply to residency programs. Nelson, shout out to you. When you apply to residency programs, the medical school sends out a letter to all the programs. It just talks a little bit about you, about, what classes you took, your grades, your scores, what were your evaluations. And so in that form, you have to account for any time that you're not actually enrolled in medical school. And so that kind of came up since there was this gap here. They asked me about it. And to be honest with you, it was a great opportunity for me to like talk about, step 1, what happened with step 1, like why it like didn't go well, and like what happened in step 2. So for me, it all worked out. I think it definitely comes up. I think it's kind of a mix out of all the programs I went to, probably about half of them, or maybe at least a quarter of them asked me probably about like step 1 and like what happened. And then another half were just like, we just don't really care. And so I think that's also important to notice that like, if you're showing up interviewing at a program, like you don't need to say like, oh my gosh, this is what happened with this, any red flag that you had in your program. Like they know what time it is. Like they invited you there for a reason. I think sometimes there's a time to bring it up and talk about it. And other times, like if no one really brings it up to you, you don't need to like feel like you need to make excuses or justifications for anything.
Awesome, thank you so much. I think, so we have some questions that are all kind of related, and I'll just blurt all of them out and we'll see which ones you guys can kind of hang on to. So can you talk about the process of writing your personal statement? Any do's or don'ts for the interview trail? Do you have any successes or regrets with the ERAS process? And if you could do anything differently or sooner to prepare for applying, like interviews and all that stuff for EM, what would your strongest advice, what would you do differently? And then what would be the strongest advice for someone looking into doing like EM? So it's all still like around the application process, interviews and stuff. That's why I just grouped them all together.
I think
I can start. Oh, never mind.
You and Monique.
No, me and Monique.
I think let's let Kenneth go first this time. He's gotten just snuffed so many times.
Okay, so in terms of personal statement, I would say the earlier the better. Don't wait till the last minute to do it. What I did was I had a friend very close to me. She's good at writing. I'm horrible at writing, so she edited my.
Be careful. You want to say? Do you want to continue saying that right now? Make sure you want to. Are you sure you want to say all that right now?
Transparency.
I'll just play. Go ahead. Yeah.
But and then I relayed. Oh Lord, I relayed.
Hotline bling. Okay.
And then I relayed my personal statement to my clerkship director at my school. She looked over it. And then I just had like just people who had nothing to do with medicine just read it to make sure that it was grammatically correct and that it wasn't boring as well too. So I probably had like 10 edits and revisions. And I think at the end, it just made it a solid thing. Another thing in terms of do's and don'ts on the interview trail. So the pre-interview dinner, there's going to be a lot of wine, a lot of, you know, drinks and all of this stuff. Just make sure you don't go over your limit and just act a fool, you know, the day before, because you don't want to get a hangover and you don't want to give the wrong impression as well too. And I think in terms of the ERAS, just make sure that you don't, I think just the biggest thing is just give yourself a good amount of time. As soon as ERAS opens, even if you don't have everything completed, just start working at it bit by bit, because you don't want to get the crunch time where it's due and you're just all flustered and you just end up making a mistake after you send in your application. So I think that's just the biggest thing. Yeah.
So, and ERAS is the residency application, by the way. So
to piggyback off of that, as far as personal statement, like Kenneth said, make sure you have people of all different backgrounds read it, for, like he said, like grammar, for entertainment, for just overall, like how does it pertain, and then medically wise. So I write something about, like, you can use this in two instances. One, to write something about like what you're passionate about, like using incidents like in your past life, like how it pertains to why you came into emergency medicine, if we're talking about emergency medicine specifically. For example, like I basically wrap my personal statement around my experience in Haiti, because that was the first time I realized that, wow, emergency medicine is exactly what I want to do. Then wrapped in kind of like my fourth year, or my third year actually, experience in emergency medicine and onward. So that's kind of how I wrap mine. But I know some friends who, like, if they failed like a school, like a step 1 score or something like that, they would kind of throw that in there, as they wouldn't just like blatantly say, I failed step 1, this is why, but they kind of like write the story to show how they grew and how they adapted from that failure. They didn't just give up. They were like, yes, this happened, I'm owning up to it, but this is why, and this is how I grew, et cetera, et cetera. This is what I learned about myself in the process. So you can kind of use it in 2 ways. And also, and just like have a bunch of people reread it, because even like just a grammar area can be a red flag for some people. And as far as ERAS, I would just make sure you have all your, I know it's a little hard now with COVID-19, and I hope it doesn't affect this, but make sure you have all your scores in that you need, like your, what's it called? Your PE exam. I guess that's on the osteopathic, but the CK and the CS for step 2 and step 1. Make sure you have, if you're going to have it, make sure you have all your scores in, because I know that did affect one of my friends who's also going to EM. She missed out on some early, interview options, because she didn't have her PE score in on time. So that did affect her probably with the number of, because we had similar scores and everything like that and similar application, but affected her because she submitted hers a little bit later and didn't have the score that they needed to be able to offer her an interview. So at all costs, just try to have all your scores in at least by the September 15th or whatever deadline it is this year. And as far as the interview process, I think the main thing is to just have confidence. If you were offered an interview, they want you there. They just want to see that you are a decent human being, that you're going to work hard. They just want to see who you are. They have your scores. They have your GPA. They have all that stuff. So put that aside. Don't worry about it. Be confident knowing that you are supposed to be here. They want you here, and just, yourself. So I think that's a big thing. And also go to the interview dinner if they have one, because you learn a lot from there. Like, the residents are going to tell you straight up what it is. All the questions that you might be embarrassed to ask, like the PD or your interview people, like that, this is the time to ask. Because if you get matched there, you want to know what you're going to expect. You're interviewing them as well as they're interviewing you. So go to the pre-interview dinner. That's what I have to say.
And sometimes go ahead. Sorry.
So for the ERAS application, and this is something I've learned, I've also sat in the admissions committee for my medical school. In my opinion, your application should sort of tell a story about you. So I think there should be some sort of trajectory where you're explaining your passions through your personal statement, your recommendation letters, your hobbies and interests, your jobs, extracurriculars, etc. So like for me, I'm interested in medical education. And I'm also interested in social EM. So everything pretty much on my application there was some sort of tie between one of those two things. So when it came time to talk to me, a lot of times when I had interviews, they were like, okay, I know what you like. I know what you're passionate about. Now let's talk about it. And they could really see that passion come out. And to piggyback off of what Kenneth and Monique said, definitely have, I don't know if it was just my medical school friends, they were not the best at reading my personal statement because they were only checking grammar, and it was like, this story doesn't flow. So I actually had like, my mom and sister have PhDs. So I was like, okay, here, read it. And they gave me their opinion. My godmother's a lawyer. Here, read it. What's your opinion? So that having like outside perspective really helps, because people enjoy reading a good story, right? Because, when we read journals sometimes on like New England Journal of Medicine, it's not exactly a good story, right? But personal statements, I think, should be a good story into your life. So definitely take advantage of that.
Thank you, guys. We're gonna take like one more question just because we want to try and wrap.
Adama wants to say something real quick.
Adama wants to say something. Okay.
Yeah, just someone being on the other side, being in residency and being through my first cycle of like seeing applicants. For those of you that are going to be on the interview trail, just like everyone said, just to echo everyone's sentiments, if you're there for a reason. Forget about your scores, forget about weaknesses that you may think that you have, and just present your best self forward. We're trying to get to know you as a person, because at the end of the day, if you're on a 28-hour shift, it's going to come down to like, which one of these applicants am I going to want to work with when I'm like dead tired and I don't want to be there. And don't be weird. Like, you might think like, oh, like, what does that mean? Like, am I like, no, I'm telling you, I've seen people and they're so weird. So as long as you're normal and you can have a decent conversation, because some people, I'm telling you, cannot, and they need Jesus. As long as you're normal and you can have a decent conversation, I'm just trying to be real. As long as you can have a decent conversation and you don't say anything really incriminating, then you're going to be more than okay, because I've seen some people that I'm just like, how? So yeah.
The problem is, if you're weird though, you don't. How do you know you're the weird one?
That's true. But I have a quick thing to say. Oh.
I was gonna say, I can't lie. So if someone says something really off to me, like, I'll just like, and like wear a suit. It seems very like obvious, but I've seen women with like thigh-high boots coming into an interview, like for resident. Yes. And
hey, you gotta stunt. Hey, you gotta stunt on them by any means, man.
Yeah, you can stunt and be on our list. Meaning do not rank.
You left the impression though.
You sure did.
So
yeah, common sense.
Wait, Ken, did you have something to say?
Yeah, quick thing. Another thing on the interview trail, everybody talks. So make sure that you're nice to everybody, because you don't know who knows anybody. Because I mean, there's been many cases, somebody will text me, hey, what's good with this guy? Should we really bat for him on the interview trail or whatnot? So like, if you're rude to like this colleague, I'm not gonna bat for you. Like, like, don't consider this guy. So just make sure all the PDs talk, all the residents talk. Some of the residents have hit me up and like, hey, is your friend like, is he okay? Should we consider him? And I'm gonna give my honest opinion, because I wouldn't want their program to suffer because I was just batting for my friend and not being objective about it as well too. So just remember, everybody talks. Be nice to everybody, not just on the interview trail, even outside, because you don't know who knows you. So yeah.
Yeah, be nice to the hotel staff, be nice to the Uber driver, everybody from the second, like, just be nice, all from September all the way until like February. Just be nice.
No matter how tired you are, no matter
how tired you are.
Smile on it.
Don't
You're
forget
over there washing your suit in the hotel sink, like, yo,
yeah,
it's gonna be, whatever you gotta do.
And I just want to say, don't forget about the hobby section. Make sure you put something down. It doesn't matter if it's the gym. It doesn't matter if it's traveling. Like every single interview, like there's been interviews that we just talked about my hobbies. Like that was it. They were like, that's all we talked about the entire time. They find that like very important, because like I said, they know your scores. They know your everything. They want to know you. So don't forget about the hobby section. Make sure you put something in there and actually do that hobby. Don't just lie about it.
Yeah, okay. there was one more comment. Hakima said that his or her step one got canceled due to COVID-19. They're burned out. Are there any tips on how to stay motivated during this time? And then also to like follow up on that question, if y'all were thrown into the whole COVID thing, because given that a lot of schools are talking about like, like amping up the process and speeding that process up, would you guys be ready?
Earl said, put me in, coach.
Right. I mean, we're definitely ready, right? We're all at this point for a reason, right? We've worked hard. We've put our head down. We've been grinding for a very, very long time. Definitely, I think we're ready. I think for trying to find motivation, I think you just have to continue to come back to why is it that you're doing what you're doing? And this is something that I had to do, I think, all throughout medical school when things got tough, and not only just for step one. I absolutely feel for the M2s right now. I could not imagine. I would say just keep that Anki deck going strong. Keep getting through those flashcards. I mean, and it's tough because we don't even know, right? Like, when are these testing centers even going to open back up? So it's tough, but definitely try and come back and just remind yourself why it is that you're doing what you're doing.
And I think it's important to say that, like, yeah, we know we're medical students, we study all the time, but if you're feeling burnt out and tired, take the time for yourself. Like, plan in like 2 hours or an hour a day to legit be like, this is about me. I'm not going to regret watching Netflix. I'm not going to regret exercising. Just do something that keeps you sane. Because that's what I, found out, like, after studying for like second year, I was just like studying all the time. I stopped going to the gym. I was eating whatever I wanted. Like, I was just miserable. And then I was like, enough of this. So it's important to have your grounding and still do the things you enjoy to do and actually put them in your schedule. Don't forget about yourself.
That's real.
I was gonna say, I know this COVID thing is like affecting everybody, and especially the M2s, but I would say, hey, maybe this might be a blessing in disguise, just extending the time that, you can do more practice tests and, Anki decks or whatever, just memorize first aid, because I think for me, like, time was also kind of a key factor in terms of like my schedule as well too. So just having this extra period of time. And I think, like Monique was saying, that, just making sure you're sleeping adequately, making sure that you're doing things that you love on the side as well too, and just keeping in contact with people that are going to motivate and support you during this time, I think are the biggest key factors to being successful in like this year and the years going forward. So yeah.
And just to like co-sign on what Christy said, in terms of like, it's my heart, that when I heard about the fact that prometric centers were being closed, my heart just went out, because I knew how much of that, how terrible of a time that period was. And just to throw this on top of it, so really, obviously, it's like the M2s and also like M3s, as they're thinking about, I want to go into EM. I had some away rotations lined up. Those things are getting moved around. It's a very stressful time for everybody. You know what I'm saying? Stressful time for people's families. And on top of that, we have people's family members who might be losing their jobs and just these different fundamentals of life, which are like valuable. So the thing I would really stress is like, it's okay for you to take a break. Like, right? Society is like being traumatized right now. So just take a break. Like, be like, for the next 2 weeks, I ain't doing none of that, man. You know what I'm saying? And spend time with those people that you're close to. Spend time watching TV. Unfortunately, you can't go run around and go out and this and that or the other. If you can, like, go to a local park or go for a hike or just get outside with the outdoors, if that's an option to you, that's available to where you're at, take advantage of those things. The thing that I saw that like main advice is like, man, if you got some hobbies that you might be interested in that might not be related to like step one, do those. Like, learn a language. You know what I'm saying? Because I think I came across a post recently. It was like, for everybody who's like a med student and you're like in the house right now, this question about what did you do during that time is going to come up on your interview trail. You know what I'm saying? And I think that people aren't, I studied like to go into this profession. I personally, if I'm on the other side, I don't want to hear about that, because that's gonna be hard enough. I want to hear about, like, I thought about, like, I never had time to do yoga, so I did a lot of yoga. I never really got into like this other hobby that I was really interested in. I learned the language, where I, like, became a mentor and talked to people on Venmo or whatever that is. Like, find what it is and allow this to use your time to do things that you might have not prioritized or done before to the degree possible.
Excellent. Well said.
My view is a little bit different. I agree, but I don't think that you should take 2 weeks off and don't do anything, because attrition is surreal. Like, there's like, I was forgetting stuff as I learned new stuff. So What I would advise is maybe changing your schedule so that you're doing less studying and more things for yourself each day, but continue with the pace. So if you're studying for maybe, we were insane, we studied for like 20 hours a day. So if we're using that schedule, I would change from 20 hours a day to maybe like 10 and use that other 10 to do things that are less stressful, maybe sleep or spend time with my family and things like that. But be careful because it's a lot of information, it's a fire hose, and you do regurgitate some of that out and it doesn't come back. So make sure you're always on pace at the very least.
Like the glomerulus.
Oh my God. See, I thought it was supposed to be a safe space. I opened up about that. Like,
It's
what's
very
happening?
safe.
Oh my goodness. Guys, thank you guys so much. Like, that was the last question. I think we're gonna have to end the session here.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you guys. Like, seriously, it's been great.
Do y'all have anything you want to pub, social media, any events?
Oh,
No?
yes.
I got a mixtape dropping.
I actually, when I was talking about the URM away rotations, I actually just created a catalog. I noticed that a lot of places have like a little bit of a few programs that have them, they don't have all of them. So I actually just created a catalog that has all of the programs that have away rotations that provide scholarships. Right now there's about 70. I think I have to update 2 more that I just got. And from talking to programs, they are still accepting applications especially for the July and August months. But they are very aware that all this may change. But that is going to be available somehow. I can give it to you guys. I mean, you can post it wherever.
We'll figure out a way.
That is so lit. That's amazing.
I created it, so take it.
Sure, no,
that's love.
great.
That's love.
Thank you.
Can I just say something before we end this too? Lily and Nelson, I just wanted to like shout out y'all like for putting this together, like organizing this, like this whole service. So like everybody, like real talk, like everybody who's like, because we always think about how do we give back and stuff like that, but it's like, oh, I'll do this, but like really like trying to do it in a systematic way and like an organized way and like trying to get that information out. It's really appreciated like by the rest of us who want to do stuff, but like, oh, I'm not as technically inclined or I'm just not as motivated. So we appreciate y'all for what y'all do.
Yeah.
Thank you. Don't say it's Adama as well. So me,
yeah,
yeah.
The trio, yeah.
I appreciate y'all.
Thank you guys. And if you guys have social media, we'll get them from you afterwards and drop them in the description below for those who want to ask questions in the future. All right, this is the end of that. Thank you guys. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and yay!
Be safe, y'all.
You guys be good.
Thank y'all.
Bye.
Bye.